Hello, and welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric, and I did 11 years in prison, and I talk about prison stuff. Recently, I put up a poll on my community tab, and I asked you guys what kind of content you wanted to see, and the answer was you wanted to hear more of my story. So that's what we're doing today. In my last video, I talked about how I went through RDU, went through the diagnostics unit. They gave me my program agreement and all that stuff, and I was ready to go to prison. RDU's technically prison, but it's not like GP. It's not, the real deal. So they told me that the night before I left that I was going to Ellsworth Correctional Facility. They brought me my program agreement. I signed it, and that night I didn't sleep much at all. They came and got me first thing in the morning. I can't remember if they served me breakfast before I went over to A&D. A&D is admissions and discharge. I can't remember if they fed me at A&D or if they fed me in my cell. But anyway, they came and got me real early in the morning. And there were a bunch of guys, and we all went over to A&D to be prepared for transport. So you get there, and they give you these jumpsuits to put on. And you have something called belly chains. So you got a chain around your waist, and your hands are cuffed, and there's a D-ring that connects your handcuffs to the chain around your waist. And then you also have a chain that runs down to your ankles from your waist to what is called leg irons. They're basically just handcuffs with a really long chain where they, chain your ankles together. We were sitting over there for a while. Oh, I think there was probably about 20 or 30 of us somewhere around there, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we all got onto the bus. Now, the buses then were different from how they are now. Think old school Bluebird bus, right? And there was a cage in the back for seg guys that they were transporting, and there's also a toilet back there. So they had a couple of cages in the back. Now, you don't ever want to use the toilet on the bus. It's weird. It's just, you're sitting on a shitter in front of a bunch of other dudes, which you grow accustomed to in prison, but it's whatever. But you don't want to do it on the bus because you have to get unchained and all this other shit. Not convenient. But you get on the bus, they give you a sack lunch before you get on. You give the officer your inmate ID, so they keep track of, who's on the bus. I believe there were 2 or 3 officers on the bus. They stopped at the guard shack on the way out of the prison and checked their guns out. They grabbed their guns from the weapons shack. So they were armed with 12 gauge. Now, these guards were black suits. You heard me talk about them before in some of my other videos. They're basically the goon squad, whatever you want to call them. They're the special security team is their official designation in Kansas. Now, we were on a drive to Ellsworth, and I believe from El Dorado, it's between 3 and 5 hours. They take a really weird route, I guess, so people can't predict the route of the transport bus and stuff like that, but they drove us out to Ellsworth, and it was a long ride. So the guy that I was sitting with on the bus was kind of strange. He had been in RDU for a long time, and RDU doesn't have a lot of things to do. You don't have a lot of books to read. You don't get to watch a lot of TV. You don't get a lot of time out of your cell. And he had been there for a very long time. And he developed this habit of rocking back and forth. A lot of times when people are locked down for a good portion of their day, they'll begin to develop strange little habits to get rid of some of that excess energy. For me, I would pace the cell. For this guy, he developed the habit of rocking back and forth. He was very quiet. He didn't speak to me much, but I felt like things were kind of looking up finally. So it's a beautiful day in March. I just got out of RDU, and I'll never forget. I'm not a Nickelback fan, but the song that was playing on the radio in the prison bus was Amen, I'm Alive by Nickelback, which Although I don't like Nickelback, that kind of seemed fitting for the moment. I had just made it out of RDU and was going to a better place, and I was pretty happy about that. So, but we got to Ellsworth, and Ellsworth is kind of a hub, the transport hub for KDOC. So what they do, no matter what prison you're going to in the state of Kansas, you will go to Ellsworth, and you'll go from one bus to another bus, and then they'll send you to wherever you're going from there. I was going to Ellsworth, so I didn't have to get on another bus. It was just like a 3-ish hour ride. It was probably more than that. I don't really remember. I didn't have a watch on me. But we got there, and we had to sit in A&D for a while because they had to get around to processing us. So we ate our lunch, our sack lunch there in A&D. And then they got our measurements, they gave us our clothes, and they told us what cells we were going to and what cell houses we were going to. The only cells that were open were in H-Pod. So it was a newer building at Ellsworth, and H-Pod was actually the hole, but they had cleared the top run out to use for Gen Pop. So you had guys downstairs that were in the hole, and upstairs was Gen Pop. They moved me in with a guy named John Smith. John Smith was really cool. We got along well, and he had just got off the bus like me. He was doing 3 years on an ag battery case for having a BB gun fight with his friend. He was from Wyandotte. It's kind of funny, in the state of Kansas, the battery laws are real crazy. You could be just having fun with some friends and, get charged with a battery, and it'll stick sometimes. Anyway, me and John got along real well. I think we got there either the day of canteen or the day before canteen, but I remember one of the first things that I did after I got there, I went to canteen. It was either the same day or the next day. I picked up my stuff, and I brought back a little bag of canteen, and I sat down and I ate a ramen noodle soup, and I drank a cherry Coke. That was pretty cool. One of the first things that I did, and John and I sat down, shared a meal together, had a few laughs. It's pretty cool. Ellsworth wasn't like other prisons. It looked like a college campus. They had a horticulture group where guys could learn that, and they could learn landscaping and learn how to plant stuff and grow stuff. So there were flower beds all over Ellsworth, and that kind of added to the feeling that it wasn't like a regular prison. One of the other things that was kind of cool about Ellsworth is that it didn't have any towers. It was right next to an airport, so that was kind of different. And I really liked it. It was pretty nice yard, nice compound. And I had a few friends, guys that I was in RDU with, a couple guys I was in county with. I mentioned in another video a guy named Chopper who asked me for my tray when I was in RDU, and I let him have it. And he was there as well, so we were kicking it, me and Chopper and John Smith. Chopper's name was also John Smith. There's a lot of John Smiths in prison, oddly enough. But it was cool, man. Things were going good. It was looking up. I had lost some weight while I was in RDU. I was stressed out, hadn't been eating. I was a little over 200 pounds when I was in county, and then when I got out of RDU, I was, around 165 or so. So, I was starting to put on some weight again and starting to get in the swing of things. And it was going pretty good. I had some friends around and people that I enjoyed hanging out with and people that I enjoyed lifting with. Now, when I first got there, I did get in a couple of fights. Nothing big, nothing spectacular, just small scraps. Didn't get caught, didn't go to the hole or anything like that. And I might talk about that more in a future video, but I didn't want to make this one longer and more excruciating than it had to be. But they moved us over to Building 2, and I had a good friend over there named Fat Freddy. He was doing good, and he was a good friend of mine. I considered him family. And I was doing business with him. And when I first went to prison, I was still smoking, and you know, even though it wasn't allowed, you could still get cigarettes that were being smuggled in. And so I was buying them from Freddie for about 3 stamps a piece, and it was an all right deal. But then one day when I bought some tobacco from Freddie, there were some white guys who kind of saw it go down. Freddie's black, and my thing is, I don't care what race, nationality, religious creed, political affiliation you have, where you're from, anything like that. If I think you're good people, I'm gonna mess with you. You know, that's how I am. I don't care about anything like that. I care more about a person's character than anything else. But anyway, these white dudes pulled up on me after I was done hollering at Freddie, and they said, "Hey man, you need to do business with your own kind. You shouldn't be messing with him. You should be doing business with us." And I pretty much said, you know, whatever, dude. Freddie's good people. I know him, and I'll do business with whoever I want to do business with. You need to mind your business. And maybe that wasn't the right thing to say, but that's how I felt. Well, Freddie saw that go down, and he came over and he hollered at me. And he's like, "Hey man, what was that about?" And I said, "Well, apparently those white dudes don't want me fucking with you because you're black." And that really pissed Freddie off. And Freddie went and hollered at his cousin, and they pushed up on those white dudes. And Freddie, he's kind of a big guy at the time. He probably weighed close to 300 pounds, if not a little bit more, and about 6 foot tall or so. And he, you know, was a Golden Gloves boxer when he was a kid, and he could handle himself. And him and his cousin pushed up on them white dudes, and apparently they didn't like it too much. He'd ended up coming down on me. They accused me of trying to start a race war. Well, time went on, and you know, I had a bunch of white dudes pissed off at me. Now in prison, there's a religious group called the Ossetrus, and Ossetru is basically a religion that's based on Old Norse mythology, and kind of the whole Viking thing, Norse customs and stuff. And it's a legitimate religion for a lot of people. However, in prison, they run it kind of like a gang and kind of a white power thing, often enough. So, you know, all these Ossetrus were starting a trip with me, thinking that I was trying to start a race war and stuff. And one day, one of them, who was a shot caller, and he was also living with a guy that I didn't get along with. I called the guy a rat, or that was what the rumor was, as I called the dude a rat behind his back. Anyway, so his cellie didn't like me, and he didn't like me because he thought that I was stirring up shit on the yard. But that's just who I am, not really someone who likes to stir up a lot of conflict, but I am the type of person, I'm going to hang out who I want to hang out with. I don't care if it's your prison custom to do it this way or whatever. I'm going to fuck with who I want to fuck with. I'm going to do business with who I want to do business with. Period. You ain't going to tell me who I can and cannot hang out with. You know, that ain't going to happen. That don't fly. But one day, this dude who was a shot caller for the Ossetrus was glaring at me, you know, and we were passing each other, and we were both walking someplace, and I saw a dude eyeballing me as he was going his way and I was going mine, and I kind of just smiled at him and laughed. You know, I ain't afraid of you. You ain't intimidating me. And he got all mad, and he came over, and he's like, "I want you off this compound." I didn't realize he was a shot caller, so I kind of popped off at the mouth. I said, "Fuck you, punk." And that's not something that you say in prison to anybody, much less a shot caller, unless you want to fight. You don't call someone a punk unless you want to fight. That's a very disrespectful term. If somebody calls you a punk, you better swing on them. And he did not swing on me. And I should have known something was up right then and there, because he did not do a thing. And later on, I was in the weight pit, and the weight pit in Ellsworth was a blind spot. They didn't have any cameras out there. And about 4 or 5 of them dudes jumped me. And, you know, they knocked me down to the ground, and they started stomping on my hands and on my ankles and on my head and kicking me in the ribs. And that was real fun. And when all was said and done, you know, no one caught us, and my adrenaline was pumping a little bit, so I didn't really feel anything. I went back to my cell. But what they were trying to do when they were stomping on my hands and legs and stuff like that, they were trying to break my arms and legs. And they did succeed in breaking one of my ankles, and one of my hands was banged up pretty good. And the next day I had my head was all swollen up and looked like a football damn near. But my head was swollen, I had a black eye, and my lip was swollen, and I couldn't go to medical for it, because then they were going to ask what happened, and I wasn't about to tell on anybody, and I wasn't going to go to the police about it or anything like that. And I couldn't really walk around, because if somebody saw me walking around with a bunch of bruises and stuff, they'd start asking questions. And I couldn't walk to the chow hall anyway, because my ankle was broken. I just kind of hung out in the cell and read books. My cellie would bring me some ramen noodles and stuff, and I'd make some ramen noodles and laid up in bed for a few days. And, you know, I would still hobble to the shower the best I could and shower and stuff every day. Well, one day I went to the shower, and I was coming back from the shower. It had been a couple of days, you know, so I was still pretty banged up looking. And I'll be damned if there wasn't a guard doing rounds when I got out of the shower. And I almost walked right into him. I just tried to, you know, kind of put my head down and try to walk by him unnoticed, you know. But he immediately saw my face, and he was like, "Hey, man, what happened to you? What happened to your face?" And I'm like, "Oh, I fell down the stairs." And he's like, "You sure? You sure you're okay?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm good." And I kept walking. Well, sure enough, you know, just like 5 minutes after he left the pod, they came in and they cuffed me up, and they took me to the captain's office, took me to the hole, and they put me under investigation for fighting. And they went around and they checked knuckles and stuff in the pod. When a fight happens in prison and they don't catch who did it, they will often go around and they'll look at the inmates' knuckles and stuff to see who was fighting and try to figure out what was going on. But they never figured out what was going on. And they never, you know, they reviewed the camera footage and stuff from all over and didn't really see where it happened or anything. So they didn't have anything. And in Kansas, if they think that you're going to get into it with someone, like if you have a situation like mine, where someone was clearly in a fight, but they didn't catch the fight, and they felt like whoever was in the fight was going to be attacked again, what they will do is they will put you in segregation, and they will ask you, in order to get out of segregation, you have to sign what's called a PC waiver. It's basically a legal waiver saying that you don't want to be in protective custody, and that if anything happens to you in GP, you won't hold the state responsible. And you have to sign that to get out of the hole if you've been under investigation for something like that. So of course I signed it. I didn't want to be in PC. I didn't want to stay in seg, you know, as far as they were concerned. My story was I just fell down the steps. I didn't know, I don't know what you're talking about. So I signed my paper. They let me out of the hole. It was only, a few days or so. It wasn't a long time. But I got out of the hole, and they put me in a pod back over in Building 4. It was a pod with a lot of old folks and stuff, and a few young cats in there, but it was a lot smaller than the pods over in Building 2. And, you know, for the time being, I didn't have any more problems with the white dudes or anybody else, really. I just started doing my time. And I had a good little hustle going. I would cook for people, and that's how I would make my money. I would have them, you know, if they wanted to eat for a weekend when they were watching the game or something like that with their buddies, they would buy a bunch of food and they would give me the food to cook because I was a decent cook. And I would put that together and I would get some of the food in return. But then I kind of started, something else good happened. I started working in the church. I had a really good job as a porter. It was great. You know, I was making money. My parents were coming up to see me on the weekends. It was real cool. And this went on for several months. And then I started moving tobacco. You know, I started selling tobacco. I had a guy who had an officer bringing in tobacco, and he would have an officer bring it in, and then he would turn around and sell the tobacco to me. I could buy 10 pouches of tobacco, bugler tobacco or whatever, for $10 a piece, which was a really good deal. And I could turn around and sell it, you know, for 3 stamps a square, about $1 a square, $1.20 a square, whatever at the time. The other way we would sell it is we had these deodorant caps. We had a roll-on deodorant that they sold on Canteen, and we would take the cap off of there and we would measure out caps, and we would sell a cap of tobacco for about $7. And so, you know, you can get quite a bit of money out of a pouch. If you're only paying $10 and you turn around and sell, you make a lot of money off that. So I was raking in the cash, and you know, sometimes I was moving, well, at least 8 to 10 pouches, you know, every week. It was going quick. People in Ellsworth had decent money and stuff like that. So, you know, I was bringing in the money, but I got careless because I was also smoking a lot, and I had a lot of the tobacco in my cell. Well, one day I had been smoking in my cell, and an officer was doing rounds right after I got done smoking. And he smelled it, and he came in and he wanted to search the cell. Now, I kept my tobacco on the drawstring of my sweat shorts. I had a pair of sweat shorts. You can buy shorts in prison, you can buy sweats. And I had this pair of sweat shorts. Tobacco was in a cloth pouch tied on my drawstring, and I tucked it down on the inside. So the tobacco would be hanging down around my nuts, and the way I figured it, if I got patted down, they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't think anything of it. Well, this dude was quick. He came in and he patted me down, and I figured I was home free. I was going to walk out of the cell and he was going to shake my cell down and not find a thing. That's not what happened, though. After he patted me down, he said, "Hey, hold up a minute." He said, "Pull your drawstring out of your shorts." And I thought, man, I'm caught. So I pulled it out, and sure enough, there's that pouch of tobacco. But he hadn't seen what was in the pouch yet. And at that time, the way the rules were written in prison was if you could get rid of the contraband before they could verify what it was, then they couldn't charge you with it. Nowadays, if you flush contraband, they're going to hit you for dangerous contraband either way, whether or not they recover the evidence. But that's not how it was at this time. This was in 2008. And so he's like, "Okay, hand it over." And instead of handing it over, I acted like I was going to, and then I went for the toilet. He was standing between me and the toilet. So I think it's like a 12 by 8 cell, and, you know, I was by the desk area. When you're in the cell facing the door, you have the bunk behind you, you have the desk to your left, and then the toilet was right there next to the door. And so he was between me and the toilet. So I tried to get around him and reach for the toilet, and he grabbed my arm, and we started wrestling. And I was trying to keep this pouch of tobacco away from him. So I had this tobacco in front of me, holding on to it, and he's trying to grab me. And at some point, it was just kind of instinctual. You know, I kind of went like that, trying to get him off me, I guess. I wasn't really even thinking about it. I just did it. And I caught him right in the mouth with an elbow. And we wrestled for a little bit more, and finally I got him off me, and I threw the tobacco in the toilet, and I flushed it. And that dirty bastard ran over, and he snatched that tobacco out of the toilet, reached in the toilet and grabbed it and pulled it out. I don't know how y'all feel about this, but prison toilets, they don't even sound clean. All right, you got a lot of dudes using that toilet, and a lot of them aren't super clean. I wasn't a super dirty person in prison, but that was a brave guard. Like, you know, if that was me, I'm kind of a germaphobe, so I would have been getting shots and immunizations and vaccines if I did something like that. Oh no, not doing it. He didn't even hesitate. He reached in, grabbed the tobacco, and then he grabbed me, you know, and he's asking me to cuff up. I'm like, hey, you got the tobacco. That's all I was trying to do, is get rid of it. So I turned around and cuffed up. And it was back to the hole. And this time I was looking at disobeying direct orders, dangerous contraband, and battery on an LEO, a law enforcement officer, because I caught him in the mouth with my elbow. At this point, it was beyond internal management policies and procedures. I was looking at getting a new case, and we're talking 3 to 5 years minimum for hitting an LEO. And I was already doing 13 years, so I'm thinking, man, I could be doing 20 years over this. I was not happy. But the way the KSA defines battery is, you know, hitting someone with the intent to cause harm. So the day of my DR hearing rolls around. They take me to the disciplinary officer's hearing, which they actually held in the unit team's office. And I actually called the officer who cuffed me up as a witness at the hearing. See kind of a pattern here. I always felt that meeting the person who was writing me up head on and directly was a better option than trying to skirt around the situation or avoid it. So I called this guy as a witness. His name was Eno. And I said, hey, so the KSA defines battery as any physical contact or hitting someone with the intent to cause injury or bodily harm. And honestly, I was trying to throw the tobacco in the toilet. Do you feel like I was trying to cause you bodily harm? Or do you feel like I was just trying to get the tobacco to the toilet? I mean, after I cuffed up, or after you took the tobacco, I cuffed right up. And he said, yeah, you did. You cuffed right up after I got the tobacco. And I think that's probably what you were trying to do. I don't think you were trying to hurt me. I think you just wanted to get rid of the contraband. We were kind of wrestling around, and, you know, in the moment, you're not always aware of what you're doing. And so that was it, as far as the battery on an LEO. After I was done talking to him, they actually called him on the phone for the DR hearing. He wasn't there in person. But after I got done talking to him, I told the DR officer, I said, hey man, I'll plead guilty to the tobacco contraband. I had tobacco on me. I know it's against the rules. I'll plead guilty to that. And I'll plead guilty to disobeying direct orders. I did that. But I wasn't intending on hurting the guy. I really wasn't. And he said, I believe you. And after listening to what Officer Eno had to say, I believe you're telling the truth as far as that goes. And I respect you taking a guilty plea on that. So I'm going to find you guilty for the tobacco contraband and the disobeying direct orders, but I'm going to find you not guilty on the battery of an LEO. And he said, you really need to get your shit together, because this could have gotten a lot worse. You could have got a new charge over this, and you know, you could have been going to Supermax. So, you know, that was crazy. That was how that ended. And I went back to my cell, and I was made max. So, because I was already high medium because of my age, as far as my security level goes, and they were going to make me max custody and ship me out. So, and they did. I was in the hole for a couple of weeks, and then I got back on another bus, and away we went. One other thing, though, something interesting that happened when I was Ellsworth. I had my 18th birthday while I was in Ellsworth. I was 17 years old when I got there in March. My birthday was in April. You know what I did for my 18th birthday? I smoked 2 cigarettes. It's crazy, man. But that was my 18th birthday present and party, was 2 cigarettes. So stupid to think about it now. It's ridiculous, man. Anybody who's watching this, please don't throw your life away. There's so many good ways you could be spending your time, and so many better decisions and choices you can make. If you're in a tough spot, man, set your life straight. If you need help, get some help doing it. I'm sure there's good people around who are willing to help you make that change and do something positive with your life. I wish that I had. But thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll continue this story in another video later and talk to you about when I went from Ellsworth to El Dorado. But that's it for now. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I will catch you all later.
Break these chains. They can